They would have made me wear a mask and stay home both.
We will call the January 21st, 2020 governing body meeting to order. Let's give our attention to Councilmember Valdivia Aquila for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
This evening we have for invocation Reverend Sarah Oglesby Dunnigan. She is the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Topeka. She is my friend, and she is also a champion of the poor and the oppressed.
Spirit of life and love, God of many names and sometimes no name at all. We begin a new year as a city council and as members of this community, concerned for our shared future. May we be guided by this future, its potential, by the world we hope to leave to our children and grandchildren and hopefully great-grandchildren, 7 generations perhaps into the future. And may we consider the needs and voices of all of our community, no matter where they live or what kind of shelter they call home, no matter where they work or if they work, by whatever means they make a living each day. Regardless of ability and identity, of home language or religion or lack thereof, regardless of whom they pray to or what time of day they pray, only know that we might pray together. May all needs be seen and heard and counted. We know that this land that we stand on today once belonged to others before us, and that our time here is indeed short, and we must make the most of it by speaking what's true and fighting for what's right and listening for the voice of God when we're not sure. May we be so blessed by your courage and commitment today and throughout the year. In the name of love, may it be so. Blessed be. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the roll call. Mayor De La Isla, Councilmember Tiller. Here. Valdivia Aquila.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson. Here. Padilla.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Leslie.
Here.
Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. A, are minutes of the regular meeting of January 13, 2020, and there are no applications.
Move approval.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lesser, seconded by Ms. Ortiz.
Councilmember Dobler actually moved.
Councilmember Dobler. Okay, you can cast your vote. Okay, we have Ms. Valdivia
Did you vote on the consent agenda? Oh,
and Mr. Lesser. Need to vote? We have 9 yes, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is action items. A is election of a deputy mayor to serve a 1-year term pursuant to Topeka Municipal Code Section A2-26B. And you will have, for this item and the next 2 items, you have ballot packets in front of you. They're labeled accordingly as 3A, 3B, and 3C. Within those ballots, they look like this. They're numbered 1 through 4. And then there's a blank one on the back in case there's a mistake or we go past 4 written ballots. So for this item, nominations will be taken from the floor. In accordance with the governing body rule 4.1B, council members who have served the longest period of time and have not previously served as deputy mayor will automatically be nominated. Therefore, if Councilmember Emerson agrees, he is automatically nominated. Once any additional nominees have been identified, the governing body will vote by written ballot on the forms provided. The ballots will then be passed to this side of the table so the city attorney and city clerk can tally the vote. So at this time, I will open the floor for to accept nominations. Ms. Ortiz?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Emerson.
I accept.
Okay. Is there any other nomination?
We'll move the nominations cease.
All right, nominations are closed. You're going to have them tally it. Okay. Just to go ahead and pass. Can you go ahead? Cash. Okay. Go ahead and tally the votes on your ballot and pass them around, please. Special assistant. You should have
But this one.
So we have 8 votes received for Tony Emerson and 1 for Ms. Hannah Nager. So, Mr. Emerson, you're the deputy mayor.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you very much. I do need to apologize to Coach Self. I understand the viewership to the KU game is way down tonight due to our meeting being same time. So I do apologize to Coach Self and the Jayhawks who are getting ready to win that. Will the city clerk please read the next item?
B is election of 2 city council voting representatives to serve a 1-year term on the Joint Economic Development Organization JEDO board.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Mr. Padilla and Neil Dobler.
Thank you. We have Councilmember Padilla and Councilmember Dobler. I would like to nominate Councilman Lesser. Are there any other nominations? Ms. Hiller? Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Both with this one and the MPO, I just wanted to throw something out. I go anyway, so I don't need to be a voting member. But I think in the past we've tried to elect, well, already the mayor and the deputy mayor serve on JADO, correct?
That is correct.
And that we've given some thought to electing one new council member and one more seasoned council member to JADO. So I just throw that out there. And it's also possible, I'll check with the clerk and the city attorney, but I think people can self-nominate if they choose. So if there's somebody that really would like to do that, I would like to hear from them.
Sure. So right now we have Councilman Lesser, Councilman Padilla, and Councilman Dobler. Are there any other nominations?
I nominate, can I, or do I have to raise my hand?
Yes, Councilwoman
Yes, Your Honor.
Valdivia Alcala.
I'd like to nominate Spencer Duncan and Karen Hiller.
Okay. You both accept the nomination? Guess I should have asked that before. But okay. So now we have Councilman Lesser, Padilla, Dobler, Duncan, and Councilwoman Hiller. Are there any other nominations? Not seeing any. At this time, I close the nominations. And I would ask, we all have ballots in front of us. I would ask that you please vote for the two. I'm sorry. We do have a person signed up to speak, Mr. Curtis Sneeden. If you'd come up, sir, please, and state your name, and you have 4 minutes to state your case.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Curtis Sneeden, Greater Topeka Partnership. If I need 4 minutes, then I haven't done my job. Just very briefly, I'm here to let you know on behalf of the CEO of the GTP, Matt Pavarnik, and my most esteemed colleague, Molly Howie, that of course they would be here tonight if they could be. They actually are showing a site selector around town, another potential company coming to Topeka. They, like all of us, regard this role to be among the most important roles that you play, and they hold their relationship with JADO in very high regard. So please don't interpret their absence as a lack of support or interest. They are highly interested in the work that JADO does and look forward to continuing that work with you. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sneeden, for your comments. And just as a reminder, it takes 6 votes. So the highest number wins, of course, but 6 votes each is required. So this might take a couple iterations, but please make your selections now and then sign by your name. And pass them to the left.
This one too. Okay.
Councilwoman Hiller, go ahead.
While they're counting, with that many candidates, is there a plan that will like keep the top 4 or the top 2, or how do we take it after this first
We're
ballot?
working on that right now. Actually, I would defer to City Manager Trout on that.
Maybe it'll talk to us.
Okay, so right now we have Councilmember Padilla received 6 votes. Councilmember Lesser received 5. Dobler received 3, and Councilmembers Hiller and Duncan received 2.
So at this point, City Clerk, Mr. Padilla now has been elected.
Correct?
So now we'll take a second ballot, correct?
Correct.
And we'll see if anyone gets the threshold. If they don't, we'll do it a third time.
Correct.
Okay, so please vote on ballot number 2. And just as a note, Mr. Padilla didn't have a ballot 2 for some reason, so I gave him one of mine, and he'll just,
Okay, and you're just voting for one member,
just one member this time, yes.
one of the nominees. Okay, it looks like Councilmember Lesser received 5, Duncan and Dobler received 2, and Hiller none. So it looks like we need another ballot.
Okay, so let's do a third ballot, please. And I will give Mr. Padilla my last ballot. Oh, okay.
Voter suppression
There will be no voter suppression. I do.
It's, well, the same people would be nominated still. You just revote.
Yeah, so the people eligible to be voted, I'm sorry, is Mr. Lesser, Mr. Dobler, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Hiller.
Right.
Just vote for one only, please, and sign your ballot. While she is tallying these up, I just wanted to remind everyone, the audience as well as my colleagues up here, all of us as members of the City Council are automatically members of the JADO Board. The only difference this entails is when there's an official vote, but I really hope everyone comes to every JADO meeting and participates. You can ask questions, you have every right, except the only difference is a vote. But it's, as Mr. Sneeden said, it's probably one of the bigger duties we have because that's our future economic.
Okay, Mr. Lesser receives 7 votes, Duncan 1, Hiller 1. So Mr. Lesser and Mr. Padilla.
Okay, well, congratulations to Councilman Padilla and Councilman Lesser. And look forward to having you gentlemen serve as voting members of JADO. All right, will the clerk please read the next item?
C is election of city council representatives to serve on the Metropolitan Topeka Planning Organization, MTPO Policy Board.
And Madam Clerk, I would like to nominate Mr. Dobler. Oh, yeah. Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
I'd like to nominate Karen Hiller.
Dobler. Okay, we have Councilman Dobler, Councilwoman Hiller, and this is for 2 spots on the Metropolitan Topeka Planning Organization Policy Board. Mr. Dobler.
I'll nominate Mr. Duncan.
Mr. Duncan, okay. Any other nominations? Yes, Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will go ahead and pass this time. I have served a substantial number of terms on the MPO. Very committed to it. I hope that people will, if anybody wants to volunteer besides the nominees, that they do that. It's important work. We have been vying for Polk Quincy Viaduct funds and working with KDOT on advancing a variety of transportation agendas. So I encourage people to run, but I'll go ahead and pass on the nomination this time.
Okay. Any other nominations? Yes, Councilman Padilla.
I'd like to nominate Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala if she's willing to accept the nomination.
Councilwoman, please.
Thank you, Mike, but I have to decline. Thank you, though.
Okay. Are there any other nominations then? Seeing, there's 2. Yeah, we have 2 people and there's 2 positions. Mr. Duncan and Mr. Dobler. I think she's going to second your nomination, Mr. Duncan. So seeing no other nominations, at this time I close the nominations. Please vote for your 2 council members.
Do we need to?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Please vote, sign your ballot, and pass it to the left.
midday things, or just wanted to wait till you've been on a while?
Okay, both nominees received 9 votes, so we have council members Dobler and Duncan serving on the board.
Thank you. Congratulations to Councilman Duncan and Councilman Dobler, our new MTPO board members. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, moving on, will the city clerk please read the next item?
D is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Tratt authorizing improvement project number T60111300, which provides for street improvement for Sherwood Village subdivision as more specifically described herein.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, we're going to discuss the special improvement districts in 3 different cases that will be considered. The use of benefit improvement districts is common in most cities. It's an opportunity for us to partner with housing developers to get new housing subdivisions completed in our community. The risk is reduced by having such a policy for cities, and ours has been set up for a period of time, and recently we had some changes made to it that strengthened it. Our policy has protections that presented a few years ago, help provide surety of payment for those incentive for the development of the infrastructure in those areas. Finance and Administrative Services Director Lamondola will make a presentation providing an overview of our particular program and policy. And then after that, City Engineer Brian Faust will review the particular requests tonight. He'll cover all 3 at once here regarding the process, and then we'll have 3 different votes. With this particular one, the last comment that I have is with this, this was brought forward seeking approval. Normally, a lot of times we look at things, we bring them for discussion first, and then we take action. With the timing on this, we thought it was important to bring this forward now for approval rather than waiting 2 additional weeks so that the developer could have this approved, get the paperwork done, and get started on their development a little sooner. So with that, Jessica?
Good evening. I'll try to be quick. Just before we start off with the presentation, I know we have some new members, so I just want to go through where you can find the policy or in other financial policies. So if you go to the City of Topeka's website, you can go to departments, go to the finance, and then over on the left you'll have a variety of options, but one of them in the middle is financial policies. So if you click on that, you'll find the capital improvement policy, the CID policy, debt management, reserve, and then special assessment and tax increment financing policy. So tonight we're going to be discussing the special assessment policy. Let me find the presentation. Okay.
I believe we all have a copy of it as well.
You should, yes. Okay, so tonight we'll talk about the special benefit district policy, what is a special benefit district, why a district is created, why the policy is important, and then part of that policy is the benefit district committee, and that's how you're receiving the recommendation to review these, and then just some key policy points to limit the city's risk. So to begin with, the special benefit district is created by the governing body upon the request of a property owner or owners for the construction of public improvements such as streets and sewer infrastructure. The unique part about this is that those costs for the improvements are then paid by the property owner by way of a special assessment that is levied after the improvements are completed. Although the developer could pay for these up front, I believe the majority of them we actually take into long-term debt, and then the debt service is placed, about equivalent debt service cost is placed on the individual property's tax levies. So that's how the improvements are ultimately paid for. A district can only be considered for the installation of public improvements owned and maintained by the city of Topeka, so it has to be within the city. We wouldn't be able to do that outside. The city policy applies to developers seeking approval for the purpose of creating these subdivisions, and the policy also allows the governing body to initiate it. But I believe the vast majority is usually a petition is received from developers. But it doesn't apply to individual property owners. So this is looking at a full development, a subdivision, not just one house. And then the project's total has to be more than 100,000. So this is unique to the post-2016 policy review. The district can only be used to finance street and then sanitary and storm sewer projects, so they cannot be used for water installation projects, and we'll get into why in a few more slides. Okay, so what is the mechanism for the district to be created? It's authorized under KSA 12-6A01, and so pursuant to the notice of a public hearing and procedures set forth in KSA 12-6A04. And then the notice and public hearing requirements do not apply if all the property owners sign the petition requesting the improvement, and that's what the three that you're seeing today. So that's another reason why we don't need the public hearing. And as I mentioned on the last slide, it can be initiated by the governing body, the subdivision. I believe we tend to see them as a response to a petition received from developers. And then once a petition is received by the city after the 2016 policy update, the city's benefit district committee is convened. The committee will review the petition and then submit it for governing body approval if all the information is needed and it's consistent with our policy. So why is a district policy important? So prior to 2016, we were receiving a variety of applications, and we started to see the delinquency rate go up. So as I said earlier, if you don't pay for it, if the developer doesn't pay for it right away after the improvements are completed, that dollar amount is then put on individual property owners. What we saw leading up to 2016 was that the properties were delinquent, and so once we issue general obligation bonds, those bonds are backed by the city, so our full faith and credit. So we have to continue to pay for them. So obviously this predates me, but I believe that this endeavor was to review the policy, to try to come up with something that fits the developer's needs, but then also limits the city's risk. And so some of the items that came up during that discussion and that are currently in the policy is that the benefit district committee was created, and that kind of just centralized the review. If a developer has existing delinquent tax obligations, any new request would be denied. We review, the committee reviews the developer finances. We also do a basic cost-benefit analysis, so we look at the cost of street maintenance versus what the benefit to property tax the city would receive after the subdivision goes forward. The city requires that the developer provide financial sureties. The number of lots is restricted, so meaning you can't apply for 100 lots. I believe now it's 42, 45, I can double check that for you. And then we have a signed development agreement. And then as I mentioned earlier, I think this is one of the biggest items, is that it requires the developer to commit to the project because they have to pay for the associated water lines. So down below, you can see that there's some very basic policy objectives. We want to promote the orderly development that is consistent with the city's land use and growth management policies, while also limiting the city's financial risk from delinquent special tax assessments. And then promote a model for the special benefit districts to be self-supporting so that the overall tax levy isn't paying for the debt service. So the Benefit District Committee, and that's how you're receiving the request for approval today, we review for the compliance with the city's policy, the petition is complete, and then the committee will then recommend to the governing body. So the committee members include the city manager or their appointee, the finance director, the planning director, public works director, neighborhood relations director, and the city engineer. So some of the key policy points, the policy now requires some sort of guarantee. I believe all 3 of the applications you'll be seeing tonight is an irrevocable letter of credit, which will be in place until a certain percentage of the lots, I believe, are completed. And then again, the big thing is the water lines, and I think that we'll see a great benefit from that. So I'm open for questions on the overall policy. Otherwise, I can hand it over to Brian Foss.
Any questions for Ms. Lemondol about the policy? Seeing none, I guess we proceed now with the presentation on the first subdivision, the first benefit district, I should say.
Actually, the first one before you this evening is Sherwood Village. Sherwood Village is located west of Indian Hills Road between 21st and 29th Street, with the main access to the 32-lot development off of Indian Hills. And there is a secondary access point off of Wexford Drive into the existing development to the south. The developer has complied with all standards and met the requirements of our benefit district policy. The improvements will be constructed to the city's current technical specifications, and costs will be spread over the 32 lots within the benefit district. The approximate length of the street that you see before you is roughly 1,500 feet. The street and the stormwater improvements are estimated at $830,000 to construct. After review, staff does recommend approval of a resolution that will establish a benefit district for Sherwood Village for public streets and stormwater improvements. The other 2 before you this evening are associated with Horseshoe Bend number 5. First is for the sanitary sewer improvements, and the other is for the street and stormwater improvements. The Horseshoe Bend subdivision is located just east of Topeka Boulevard and south of 470. This phase has 31 lots. Again, the developer has complied with all standards and met the requirements of the special benefit district policy. The improvements for the sanitary sewer, along with the streets and stormwater, will be constructed to city's current technical specifications. Costs will be spread out over the 31 lots within the limits of this benefit district. And again, the length of the road improvements is approximately 1,500 feet. Sanitary sewer improvements are estimated at $224,516. And the street and stormwater improvements are estimated at around $913,000. Staff does recommend approval of a resolution that will establish a benefit district for Horseshoe Bend number 5 for public sanitary sewer improvements. And staff also does recommend approval of a resolution that will establish a benefit district for Horseshoe Bend subdivision 5 for streets and stormwater improvements. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Faust? And by the way, those of you who are new, Mr. Faust is our city engineer. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just, did you say 32 or 52 for?
32, sorry.
32,
Yeah.
okay. And could I ask what the price range is of these homes? Do you know?
Actually, I'm not aware. Yeah? Which model? Yeah, I'm not aware.
I asked in general, but for those who haven't been following it, we've been both through Greater Topeka Partnership and our Neighborhood Relations Department have been in process of doing a housing study. And it's demonstrating, and Sasha might know the numbers, you might, but if we've got a substantial shortfall, it's in the housing from the $100,000 to $250,000 range or something like that. And so it looks to me like this would be a substantial contribution to that demand that we have here. And that backing that into the policy, that we want to make pretty sure that anything we guarantee is going to happen, that gives me some comfort. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
I have some very basic questions that I'm not quite sure how to pose, but just bear with me as I'm learning this process. So the three projects that we are talking about, is this?
Michael.
Yes. It's on. Hello? Okay. Is this, the houses are already there, and is this repair that's being done to the infrastructure or brand-new infrastructure that's being put in?
Actually, these lots have not been developed yet.
Okay.
And so this will be all brand-new infrastructure.
Okay.
And once the infrastructure goes in, they'll sell the lots and build homes.
Okay. And who does the putting in of the water and sewer? Does the city of Topeka do that?
No. Right now, the developers are not putting the water line in. In Sherwood Village, they're putting the water line and the sanitary sewer in. The city will actually bid the projects within the benefit district, and then we'll bid those out to the low bidder, and then we'll inspect those projects.
Okay. And somewhere in the urban growth plan, where I remember something being mentioned a number of times, is we want to stop growing out so much horizontally and try to build within where we already are. Is that not really part of this process? Or, I mean, I'm trying to understand, because this is on the southwest side of town, and we're trying to focus on our urban growth core area, but yet you're building these brand-new houses and all of this infrastructure, and isn't that doing what we said we're not going to do?
We're trying not to encourage urban sprawl, where we go further and further out. Both these developments, I mean, Horseshoe Bend is actually at Topeka and 470 in that area. And it's phase 5, subdivision number 5. Sherwood Village is actually sandwiched in between two existing developments.
Okay.
And so it's not going out further past that point.
Okay.
Kind of
So it's
infilling
still
a little
within
bit.
that boundary that when
Correct.
they talk about how we should stop from that point
Correct.
forward. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Faust? Councilwoman Hiller, were you? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Faust. So what is the pleasure of the body? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Lusher, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Deputy. I do have another question for.
Sorry, Mr.
No,
Faust.
not for you, Mr. Faust, for Mrs. Amendola.
Mrs. Lamondol, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell the city manager, ask you, okay. Please go ahead.
Quick question for you, and I should know this, but this isn't anything specific to these I mean, it is, but it isn't these specific developments. But in regards to the irrevocable, the ILOCs that are being provided, is there a policy, is the ILOC to be a percentage of the, because I see $250,000 ILOC, but a project that's $830,000, so I'm like, I don't know if we require a percentage or.
I'm pretty sure it's 30%.
30%.
But we'll look at that real quick.
We're looking for it. Right here.
Next page.
This is up to 10 years from a reputable bank.
Next page.
Financial guarantee shall equal at least 30% of the estimated cost of the project.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on this? Seeing no further questions, I would entertain a motion. And just to be clear, this is only on the first one, which is the Sherwood Village Benefit District.
Motion to approve.
A motion to approve by Councilman Lesser. Do I have a second? A second by Councilman Dobler. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, please vote.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
All right, well, one down. We're now looking at the next one. I'm sorry, if the clerk would please read.
E is resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing improvement project number T401082, which provides for sanitary sewer improvement for Horseshoe Bend subdivision number 5, as more specifically described herein.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have no additional comments, but staff still is available to answer questions if there are any.
Any questions on this particular item? And this is the one, by the way, that's at Topeka Boulevard and 45th, basically, east side of Topeka Boulevard. Councilman?
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Councilman Padilla, second by Councilwoman Nager. Any discussion?
And there's public comment too, we just want to make sure.
I did not have a list of public. I'm sorry. I understand there's some public comment. I do not have that. Sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. It looks like we have 2 signed up for public comment on this, so before we vote, before we discuss, I would, Mr. Raymond Thurlow, would you like to come and address the?
I signed the list, I'm sorry, I didn't want to comment.
Okay. Mr. Thurlow, by the way, I don't mean to out you here, but he is the developer of this. So he's done a lot of great developments around town. Okay, then we have Mr. Ted. Does he want to talk? Okay. All right. Well, you're like me, the least said, the better. So with no public comment, is there any discussion on these items? Okay, well, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
All right, well, will the clerk please read the next item?
F is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing improvement project number T601117, which provides for street improvements for Horseshoe Bend subdivision number 5, as more specifically described herein.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have nothing additional to add for this particular item.
And we again have 2 signed up. I see Mr. Thurlow shaking his head rapidly. So it looks like we do not have any public comment on this item. I would entertain a motion. Motion approved by Councilman Lesser, a second by Councilman Padilla. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
All right, the motion carries. I would like to thank Mr. Rowland on Sherwood Park and Mr. Thurlow. It is tough being a developer around here, just our market, and I really appreciate you gentlemen stepping out on faith in our city and appreciate your investment here. Thank you. All right, well, let's see how easy those were. Now, this next item should be just as easy. I'd ask the city clerk to read, please.
G is rescinding action taken at the December 17, 2019 governing body meeting, when the governing body voted to approve the recommendation from the Social Services Grant Committee to outsource the City of Topeka's Social Services Grant Program to a third party.
And it says on, Ms. City Clerk, it says that you'll read Were you going to read the motion, or, I'm sorry? Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Deputy Mayor.
My microphone.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First, I want to say I do not take this move to rescind lightly. Since the summer of 2019, I've been following the process, and I have deep concerns over several issues with outsourcing social service grants program. Let me start by noting the last 2 months of 2019, some of you may have noticed, there was an intense movement to get major legislation passed, which at times appeared lacking in complete information, most importantly, the cost to the taxpayers. The outsourcing is one of these examples. The estimated cost for the city to run the program is guesstimated at $56,000. My understanding, this was a calculation by staff pay rates divided by so many hours involved in administering the program. I do believe, if needed, I think that Director Sajahan can clarify that once more. The outsourcing debate started the first part of March of 2019. Final vote was made, I do believe, on December 17th of 2019. Yet, the question remains, why no time study? Will there now be consideration of Department of Neighborhood Relations budget cuts of $56,000 since staff will no longer be administering? Also, please note and remember, $10,000 has been approved to the 3 senior centers and community action. However, there remains a combined shortage of $50,000 to all 4 agencies. To senior centers, this is crippling because it lessens senior rights to healthy interaction, nutritional sustenance, and health care to needed appointments. I do believe the grant total for 2021 was listed somewhere around $434,904. I'm unsure what the next round of total money will be when the next grant cycle comes up. But we also need to understand that whatever amount is going to be set aside, the fee to pay the third-party administrator is going to be set at about 5%. So if we take the numbers that we currently have, divide that by 5%, it's going to be about $22,000, $26,000 that's going to be taken off the top of that money to pay the third-party outsourcer, and will be deducted from dollars the social service organizations will have cut from that pool of city funding. I will say there have been several good ideas from agencies over the years on minor adjustments to make the grant application process more fair, while also understanding the need for the city of Topeka to track valuable services. Some of these are scoring components on strategic planning of social service agencies, requiring agencies to have 3 years of experience before applying for a social service grant, a review, and I heard this a lot this year, a review of agencies currently grandfathered in the social service grants project, reconsideration of the minimum threshold for funding, which is currently set at 90%, and a rollback when required. City of Topeka at this point has an all or nothing scoring with its current 5-point increments. Most of all, I find it deeply troubling about how much we have heard the repeated words and comments thrown out by City of Topeka staff and at times governing body, such as the process has become too politicized. Staff is not listened to or their recommendations. The appeal process should be done away with. It is too much stress on our staff. And we've all heard the grant funding process is time-consuming gut-wrenching for council and leaves both staff and governing body open to criticism and even haters. And I say with all respect and directness as I can, this is the tail wagging the dog. We are responsible for customer service and overseeing taxpayer dollars. We are meant to be accountable and transparent government at all levels. I agree there is often nothing easy about any of this. Yet I believe working with, rather than at times against, community organizations, we can come to common sense resolutions built on mutual respect and teamwork. Will the outcome be 100% satisfactory for all involved? Probably not. Yet the process right now has not been working, nor is the washing our hands of a system we helped craft. With that being said, Deputy Mayor, I move a motion to approve.
So just to clarify, Ms. Valdivia-Alcala, you are moving to rescind the motion that was approved on December 17th, 2019, which allowed the City of Topeka to outsource social service grants program to a third-party vendor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Discussion.
Second by Councilwoman Ortiz. So now the floor is open to discussion. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I looked up today, I was one of the people that did not want this to be outsourced. I think we've come a long way. We're just not there yet. We're just not there. And I think there's some things that we can tweak. And so I will support this for those reasons and those reasons only. It does take a lot. It does take a lot to go through all the process, to hear all the process. The issue I've always had is the new guy coming in that's starting, that he doesn't qualify for anything. The other issue that I've always had is the appeal process. We put an appeal process in place for that reason, to appeal it, because things happen. And as I said before, when this issue came before us, there was a lady that was their grant writer that died in Oklahoma that had all the ties into Midland. And she did not, she died in Oklahoma, and they waited on this, and they got denied because she died. And again, that just needs to be tweaked, as opposed to, we should make sure there's not just one person out there that we contact, but another person. Just little stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think we need to continue to look at this so we know what's in place and we know what there is, because I don't want to see, and I've seen this happen sitting here as long as I've sat here, that we've had people in place we've sent this to, that they've given their buddies this or that. And that's why I really like the process that we kind of go through and we grade them in. Are we going to have to tweak some? Yes. I thought Midland, it was very unfair because this lady died and these people waited and they came to the appeal process to be told, oh, well, she died, that's on you. There's little things like that we can do to curtail that. But social services is very important. And I think if we continue to work it, it can be worked just so that everybody gets a piece of the pot. When we look at how big our budget is, it's a shame. It's a shame that, Padilla came back and asked for our senior citizens that they be funded. And, and the city manager said, okay, I'll try to look for the money. It's not that much money. It's really not. Not in this big of budget. And we can find it somewhere in there. I was on this process when it just got turned over. I liked how all of it was on there, so I could go on there and look through there to see what the problems were, to see what they weren't. I believe Karen was on that board with me when I served at that particular time. And one of the issues that one of the people got denied is because Karen caught some of the mathematical problems that was not figured right. That's what I'm saying. I think We need to be good stewards of that and good stewards of this money so that we continue to make sure that they get what they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala?
Thank you for that, Councilwoman Ortiz. I also want to say that, you know, this tweaking that needs to get done, and I listened to all the meetings, I went over notes that agencies passed on about ways to help improve the process, and I really believe that we're not looking at anything major here. So for the cost, for the time and effort to outsource it, it does not seem to me to make sense. I'm also thinking about the retreat that we had this weekend as council people, where on that table was the importance of customer service, of us bringing forth that team effort, of giving staff and giving ourselves the tools to shine even more than we do already. And I really believe, and I am no expert in it, but I have followed it for some time, the time when everybody stayed up really late and everybody presented their plea in front of, in front of the council, and we're not at that point. We are at a totally different point. And my take is, let's work in a cooperative nature. Let's give staff the tools that they need. Let's get a system that we know is a computer system, a software system that we have been told by both staff and agencies that needs to be tweaked. Let's work on that as well. I really think that we can do this. I think that we need to be so careful in how we take care of the taxpayers' dollars. And this is a way that can save them money, I believe, in the long run, and help social service agencies not have money taken right off the top of funding that is desperately needed and that gets cut throughout the years. Thank you.
Councilwoman Nager.
I have a couple questions. At this point, what steps have been taken to improve this process, since this is a process that has been seen in the past as problematic?
Mr. City Manager?
Well, in relation to the process that we have done various programs where we do grant workshops to help them to understand how to make the application. We work with organizations with regards to the reporting that they're required to do. So we work really closely with them as far as our staff, making sure that those that apply understand the rules and regulations related to the receipts of this money. Mm-hmm. And so lately, as far as the analysis on the process, I guess I would have to ask Sasha if there's anything I'm missing as far as recent changes that they've done, filling in applications and so forth. So, mm-hmm. Sasha, you have anything to add? Is that pretty much covered? She'll come forward and give you a little more insight.
I recognize Ms. Councilwoman Ortiz, please.
Well, Councilwoman Hannah, in 2005, I got elected, and we used to sit here all night and listen to all the social services give us their take on why they wanted the money, okay? And so that would require basically a whole meeting, okay? And then we'd tally and we'd figure, put some numbers together and we'd figure it out. And then we'd say, this is what you're gonna get. Then we went from that process to, they went to a committee, and then they do have software. They put that software together and they would enter everybody in, and then they give them so many points for this and so many points for that and so many points for this. And they started doing that. But like it was said, there's still some things that needs to be straightened out. And I don't think that they've really given us time to do that, because that was sent, was that 2 years ago, Sasha, that got sent to you, or 3 years ago?
Good evening, governing body members. 2 or 3 years ago that what got sent?
That when we started with the new software and it got sent to housing and development?
So the social service grant process was over in the Housing Services Division before Neighborhood Relations was even formed, so more than 5 years ago would be my guesstimate. I do believe that it was right before Neighborhood Relations got formed, that it got moved over.
But we didn't have the software yet. We didn't get the software right at first. I think that took like maybe a year or two.
We've had the software for about 4 years, I believe. We had paper applications the first year that I
Right.
recall.
Right.
So that was 5 years ago, so we would
Okay,
have
so
had
probably 4 years ago is when me and Karen, I can't remember who the other person was, but we got trained on all that software with all the paperwork and how they came to this conclusion of the scoring and all of that. And so it's been in place. But every year, there's something missing, and we've tried to tweak it, or it needs to be tweaked as well. Go ahead, Sasha.
So to answer your question directly, Councilmember Nager, each year the Social Service Grant Committee, and before that it was called the Economic and Community Development Committee, they review the score sheet, the priority sheet that sets the categories that they'll fund, and the dollar amounts that they recommend to the governing body to include in the upcoming year's budget. So each year, we also receive feedback from agencies. That's part of our normal process. And as the committee sees fit, based on the feedback received from agencies, there have been minor tweaks to the application and scoring sheets. So we do go through that improvement process every year to outline all of the changes that we've been through. I didn't bring a list, but we definitely are constantly trying to improve the process based on the feedback that we received. We did, as Councilmember Ortiz mentioned, go to an electronic application system. The agencies, I believe, were desirous of that change. So yeah, we're continually trying to improve the process with the committee. But the list goes on and on. They review the questions, they review those grandfathered agencies that Councilmember Valdivia Alcala was referring to. They approve those grandfathered agencies and their funding amounts. All of the decisions that get made about this process are made by the committee itself and then blessed by the governing body.
Councilman Duncan.
I have a question and then a comment. I'm just curious, does the outsourcing process alter how the appeal process works in any way? Or will it, or would it, or?
Well, based on the decisions of the committee, there would not be an appeal process. The outside consultant that we would hire to run and manage the program, receive the applications and score them and then present them to the committee for final approval, there is no appeal process. That was one of the decisions that was made as well.
Well, then, so my comment will be this, so I think everyone can explain my vote when it occurs. When this came up, obviously I wasn't on this body a few months back, but it was being discussed. It was out in the community. I was asked all the questions. I talked to a lot of folks. I told people then I wouldn't have voted for it if I was sitting on this council at the time. I was very public about that. I put it out on social media, put my name to it. So not just for that reason, but I'm not inclined to change that opinion at this point. And I think one of the issues I had was sort of that appeal process or lack of not being part of that procedure. And so I will stick to that because I still have part of that conviction. And part of that just stems from, I do understand in speaking with many different people, the pressures of those decisions, the time that goes into those decisions, the impact and what that means in terms of pressures. But I also feel like this is one of those areas for me where this is exactly what we're elected to do, is to watch over those dollars that are tax dollars, be a part of that process before that money's given out to the community, and then sort of take ownership of that decision. I might feel a little more comfortable if I thought there was a way, once that process went through from a third party, to be able to appeal it, do some more work on it through the committee. But so those are my reasons when I vote yes to do this. I probably wouldn't have brought the rescind up, but it's here, and I'm going to stick with what I've kind of felt from day one. So.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan, any other? Councilman Dobler, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question for the city manager, probably. The original discussion indicated that there was a savings of $30,000 or something like that. Where does that go?
Well, what we're going to do is there's a current staff member that has been handling this in the past. This staff member also, though, is required to do the homeless management information system. It's an important program that we have, entering information and tracking how we provide homeless services and the grants dollars that we receive. We have been delinquent, I wouldn't say delinquent, we've been, I guess, not doing some of the best information into that system, and we have some work to do to ensure that our grants continue to flow to us the way we need to. That time has not been there for our staff, and so this person will be ensuring that that piece of it is taken care of. And so the individual will be working in that area, which will eventually help us with our continued receipt of that money for that particular area. So it'll free up time for that individual to do a better amount of work, more work related to our homeless management information system.
But follow-up question, in hard numbers, this means this outsourcing is going to cost us
right
$25,000 or whatever the 5% is, correct?
Yes, and what I would say is that there are two companies that we currently contract with. In other words, they provide services that are similar to those that are in social service grants. Two of them we're planning to not contract again and let them apply in the pool. From that application within the pool, they'll be available for $25,000, which in the past under contract had received more. So there's going to be a surplus from when they go into the pool, and we'll be able to utilize that money to be able to pay for the cost of the outsourcing of this review. Well, basically is there's two individuals that receive more money than the $50,000 that would go to them if they each received $25,000 from the pool, because all of the money that they currently receive is going to go back into the pool of possible receipts to go out as part of grants. If they receive the full $25,000, there's still the extra money from what they had been receiving under contract that will cover the costs for the outsourcing.
Social service agencies?
You mean grandfathered agencies?
Yes, some of the grandfathered agencies, it's the contracted ones.
So, yes, thank you, Mr. City Manager. Year before last, I believe some of you will recall that part of the action that was brought by the committee was that we pulled 5 agencies out of the social service grant process because we had contracts with them for services that staff believed that if we didn't contract for that service, we'd have to provide it ourselves. So they're contracts, they're not grants. And we pulled those out. There are 3 of them went to the 4 of them went to the police department, and 1 of them went to neighborhood relations. A couple of those contracts, the police department is not interested in renewing in 2021. So as city manager is relaying to you all, we will have those contract dollars that would go back into the pot in theory, and the cap on the amount that an agency can apply to receive is $25,000. So their contract amounts are currently, one of them, more than that $25,000, so that surplus would cover our outsourcing cost.
But that's money that would just go back in the pool and be available for any social service agency, correct? Okay.
Given the
Thank you.
vote of the governing body, yeah.
Okay, I got Councilwoman Hiller, followed by Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had to give this a lot of thought. I was one of the council members who agreed to be on the committee when the council decided to bring it in-house and take care of it at a committee level, and have been kind of on and off that committee over the years. It's hard to know where to start. Overall, the reason that the council decided to take it over was that they had gone through what Councilwoman Ortiz experienced, where actually during the years when the council would stay up till midnight listening to every single social service agency, they had already been, because I was the director of one of them, they had already been through a process with a volunteer committee that had ranked and made recommendations to the council. But everybody knew that they could show up and take another shot at it by coming and talking directly to the city council, and they did. And then the council would either adopt the recommendations of that staff organized volunteer group or amend them. And then for a long time, that was done with a team of 3 people who are professionals in the social services arena. Then they tried it with citizen groups for a while. Eventually, the council said, we can't be staying up all night with this. We need to settle a process ourselves, settle the criteria, and stick by, and if we don't want to stay up all night, we need to put it in a committee, be very clear, have the council vote on all the criteria so we are absolutely knowledgeable of and standing behind that process. And then get ourselves out of it, trust that committee to make that decision. The very first year, we didn't have an appeal in there. And after the second year, we did, because the only way to be able to come back and say, we don't think this score was correct, or something specific, just to be heard by the committee, was to allow an appeal process at the committee level. So from year 2 on, and this started probably in 2010, 2011, from year 2 on, there was an appeal process available at the committee level. The idea was to have a very tight set of scoring criteria that were outcomes-based, that the agencies had to demonstrate what the need was that they were addressing and what outcomes they were accomplishing through their programs. If there was duplication of that kind of service elsewhere in the community, then why was there duplication? I mean, you don't want just one daycare center in the whole community, right? But maybe something else, there maybe one could argue based on the need that you only need one agency. So they were asked in the process to explain those kinds of things and to document their performance. To make sure that it was well done, the process, and it can change, I'm just explaining what we had, was to get a committee of 3 experts from the social service field who understood outcomes and grants and grant management to advise that process and actually do the scoring. The staff scored the various things about record keeping and turning in reports and so on, and some kind of generic things. And the expert volunteer team, which changed generally by at least one or 2 people each year, did the scoring. So then they would do the scoring, give it back to the staff. The staff would bring their collected recommendation to the committee. The idea then, like I said, was that the council would not change that, would respect the decision. What happened this year, and in the process, part of the idea was that if an agency couldn't score, maybe they wouldn't get funded. Or, the committee itself gets to set the threshold of what the scoring is before the money gets divided up. So there's still, aside from that empirical scoring, the committee can decide the threshold. There was a decision that there really shouldn't be any grants less than $10,000, just because of the administrative time on the part of the agency, as well as the part of the city. What happened this year, so there have been a couple of agencies that have been dropped along the way because they could not demonstrate that outcomes-based performance. And there can be other reasons why somebody's score could be a little bit down. The idea was not to have an end around and have the council then add money or fund agencies that didn't make it through the process. This year, for the first time, that happened. And I think it's thrown all of us. What was supposed to happen in that process was that the council would support the committee's decision, so there weren't basically appeals to the council. And then if there was a need to tweak the process, that committee was supposed to go right back into meetings and with input from the council and tweak the scoring or the system so that it worked better the following year. I think that we've learned a couple of things from this experience. One was that all 3 of the people on the committee hadn't been on it before this year, and it made it harder for them. So it was the thought we all are either have turned in our committee volunteer, that have signed up for what committees we want to be on, but there's a challenge to making sure the committees have at least one seasoned person on them each year. It just made it hard on that team. As the process went through, it wasn't really clear whether the committee was wanting to send it out to somebody else to do it their way, or whether it was to be our way. It was only fairly late in December, at about the time of the final vote, that it became clear that the assumption on the committee side was that we, the council, would set up the whole process, the whole scoring system, just like we were when we were doing it ourselves. We are at this point pretty darn late in that process. The committee wasn't able to meet last week. Generally, that's done before the end of December. Both because, and I voted to support no matter what my personal feelings were about it, I voted to support the committee's decision when it came through for the integrity of the process. We all had mixed feelings about that process. For all those things, I think I'm going to go ahead and support this proposal, because I think we need, if we want to outsource it, we may need another year to just work on it ourselves. Also, in terms of the turnaround time, the agencies are supposed to be able to start turning in their applications in March, and we haven't even updated the proposals yet. I think we need as much time. I know the committee's planning to work quickly, but I think we need that time to be ready and if possible, get the request for proposals out on time this year. And we've kind of all got our heads up now. If we want to, with some thought, decide we want to send it out next time, I'm willing to consider it, but I think keeping it this year is wise. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a few comments. The committee, this was a difficult task for the committee, as has been shared here this evening by just about everybody, and a lot of work went behind the scenes, and different conversations, questions, dialogue, et cetera, research, at least on my part, and I know on Councilman Padilla's part, which just because you worked hard doesn't mean that's a reason. But the one thing that has been consistent, and consistently that we could probably all agree on, is it's consistently had problems, and has not consistently, for whatever reason, been a positive experience, positive process, and there's issues. So when I kind of look at that, I do look at the money savings based on Sasha's information tonight, but also more in depth that was shared during the committee process, which can be argued a couple different ways, which I get. The one thing I do know, though, because of the consistency in issues with this, and I think a lot of the stories that everybody shared tonight kind of even validates all the problems that have happened in the past over that. So when I see that, I also see that we have a street department that goes out and does a really good job at fixing potholes and repairing curbs and stuff like that. But they're not who we send out to repair the bridge over Kansas Avenue when that burns down. I see the same thing, we have a good maintenance department to replace burnout lights, replace switches, but if we have to put in a high voltage panel, we're generally going to use an outside source to do that. And even to Ms. Robertson's area, they can take care of most all of the legal issues we have in the city, but there's even been one as recently as an insurance issue that we felt the need that we needed to send that out to a specialist that could evaluate that. And I kind of think that's kind of what we're doing right now, and that's what's kind of the message of the committee was. The one thing that has happened for sure is it hasn't been working and it hasn't been smooth. And nothing stops us, and that comment even came, I think, it did pass 7-2 was the vote that it passed by the council. And I think even in that process, it came back that we can go back if this does not work. But what was clear is what has been being done has not been working. And so why not give an opportunity to us have some input in some of the criteria of the weighting factors, et cetera, but then let a bridge builder or a high voltage panel installer or a specialist in defending a murder case, let that type of person take a shot at it and see if that can improve. And if it can, then it comes back. But the other issue is to a certain extent that the integrity of the process is important as well. I know that was one thing that Jeff hammered pretty hard, and I do get that. So that's really all I got, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think that any process has glitches. Any process is not going to be 100% satisfactory to anyone, whether that be staff, whether that be a constituent we're serving, an agency. There's going to be times when it's just going to come down. We cannot give everyone what they want. So that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is concerns about an appeal process that I watched that was told it was going to be an appeal process where there were all types of explanations given, especially the senior centers, from the problems they had with the application and the software. And it was, after having watched the meeting, it was like everything fell on deaf ears. I believe in the capability our staff has to cooperate with organizations, with constituents, et cetera. And I also believe, because of spending time at these senior centers, at these different locations that have received funding, and also talking to the agency directors, that they are extraordinarily flexible, that especially the senior centers work on a shoestring budget, and that calls for times for us to be maybe just a tad bit understanding of that. Yet if there is a point where we are giving something away to be outsourced because, again, it may be too hard, or, we don't want to work together on something, I have a real problem with that, and we should all be concerned about that. Let's aspire to be better. Let's aspire to learn more. And I do not believe, especially with the reviewers that are professionals, professional reviewers in the social service category, there is help with this grant process when it's being graded by the Social Service Grants Committee. That is my understanding. So, and again, I believe that there's so many unknowns right now about how it's even going to go out for bidding, and that there was so many unknowns when it was being discussed. To me, this is the type of legislation that I'm referring to, where so much of it was pushed through these last 2 months of 2019. I think some council members it caught by surprise, and other council members, I don't know what the issue is, but I just think we have to be more deliberate, intentional, and patient on how we do our programs of this nature. And I am all in as a representative to help in any way I can.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz, did you have your hand up a second ago when I called on Ms. Valdivia Alcala?
I'm sorry.
Were you waiting to say something?
No, but I do want to let you know KU is winning, so I did want to put that out there.
Shame on you.
Thank you, Councilman Lesser.
Doug, you hear that?
Call the question, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
I don't see anyone else wanting to speak on the matter. So if there is no other comments, let me just, just so everyone is clear here, a vote yes here is a vote to rescind the action that the council made. A vote no is to not rescind. Correct. Okay, so seeing no other discussion, please vote.
Okay, we have 5 yes, so the motion fails. We have Emerson, Padilla, Dobler, unless they're voting no.
Okay. Well, we now proceed to the next item excuse me, I'm sorry, we're at the end of, that concludes the action items for tonight. We now proceed to the non-action items, so if the clerk will please read the first non-action item.
A is discussion related to, the first item is establishing the first Tuesday in January following the general election as the commencement date for mayor and council member terms. And the second item will be establishing a different meeting location for the second Tuesday governing body meeting.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. These two items we'll cover first is the state law now allows us to choose what date we can do the swearing in. We know from experience that right now we were told that the swearing in of our newly elected members would be held on the second Monday of the month per the state law. But one of the things they did allow was that going forward, we're able to make adjustments to that. And in reviewing that, I think it makes the most sense for that swearing in to occur at the first Tuesday of January. That will allow the last meeting of the outgoing individuals to be the last meeting in December. It gives us a much, I think, smoother transition in the process, and so I think that that would be my recommendation. It is my recommendation related to what date we choose, and then have that date going forward. And it states so in the code that we wouldn't have to choose an actual date, but just simply state the first Tuesday in January as being the date that new members are sworn in.
Okay, it's discussion only item, so we don't need a motion.
Any questions or feedback that you want to give? We're on the right track? You have an alternative date? Or do we want to leave it? I mean, right now it doesn't, we don't actually have a date because it only stated the 13th was what it stated in our code. So we have to change it in some way, shape, or form, but this is my recommendation.
Mr. City Manager, I do have a question. What you're proposing is we do it on the first Tuesday in January.
Correct.
So would there be times when the first Tuesday might be the first?
Right. And then our scheduled meeting, first, yes, there is a possibility that it could be the first. You are correct, which then we would have it at the first, that would end up being the next meeting, because simply that meeting is canceled.
Excuse me, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Well, City Manager, couldn't you put on there unless it's a designated holiday? Something to that effect? Couldn't we put that in there?
Yes, Councilmember Ortiz, you could do that. What the state law requires is that the commencement date occur after December 1st. but
After
before-
December 1st?
Yes.
Okay.
You can do it as, you can set the commencement date in December. It just has to be after the 1st or prior to the second Monday in December, I think. Yeah, second Monday in January, I'm sorry. So that's the window you have within which to set the commencement date.
You know, I'm gonna be real honest. I really kind of like the Monday that we had it. It was kind of set aside, and it didn't interfere with our holiday or anything like that. I kind of liked it. And it threw my whole family off, and we could go do something on a Tuesday night that we don't need to. But I think even Padilla said that, you know, it was kind of nice, you know.
I understand that
You can
sentiment.
get- If you're working, you can get ready the night before and be ready on that Monday as opposed to wait. I kind of liked it, but that's just my opinion.
A lot of it is just to keep the same meeting date that we typically hold our meetings on, so that, you know, some individuals aren't aware we were meeting on Monday night, would potentially miss. So, and then my part, you know, part of the biggest thing is to get it at the beginning, more at the beginning of the month, rather than it seemed odd for me, based on my past experience, to have an additional week of the outgoing council members meeting, conducting business. Better to begin afresh at the new year to meet the first week of January.
Well, I think staff did a good job of getting us there Monday, because I forgot until.
I understand.
It was calling. What about doing what?
I guess my question would be, if we're required to do it by the second Monday, and Tuesday happens to be the first in some year, we won't be able to do it by the second Monday, correct? No? Yes, we would, because then that would be the first Monday. Is there ever a time that would come back to bite us that we wouldn't make that first Monday deadline, I guess? That'd be my question. Mr. Duncan, go ahead.
I am no calendar expert, but I was going through the next like 5 years on my, and not at least for the next 5 years or something to that effect. I was looking at it, so for whatever that's worth.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I am not looking at the statute, but what date do people's terms start with this election cycle? When,
The date they're sworn in.
the date that they're
On
sworn in?
December- So
Yeah.
for instance, this election cycle was January 13th.
So we could actually start, I watched it without having followed the statutory changes, because I knew the school board swore in December. I mean, it's been odd, I mean, it's been different, but to have 2 whole months between the election and the actual beginning of service, you know, I know we've got the holidays in there, but I looked at that and I thought, well, you know, the state passed that, that's fine, but they don't convene until January, so it's no big deal. But for us, there are 6 or 7 meetings between the election date and when people are seated, 6 anyway. And that was a long time to have, maybe it's okay, I don't know what people's thoughts were, but a quote lame duck council who, you know, and if we can start people before, I mean, it's kind of weird to start them right in the holidays.
Yeah.
You know,
Is a week gonna change it though? Is a week gonna make you feel any differently? Because that's all we're talking
I'm not
about.
sure. I mean, if we can do it December the 1st, we could actually swear people in a month later and just get going. So certainly, if we're going to leave it the way it is, it should say the first meeting in January, and that way it can be whatever, or the first Tuesday meeting in January, whatever fits, and that'll take care of the January 1 deal.
Deputy Mayor, the first time the first falls on a Tuesday is 2030. So in 10 years, it's gonna be a problem.
We're making policy forever.
Sylvia, is that going to work?
Yes, that works for Councilwoman Ortiz is the question.
Oh, and I actually have some people have standing meetings on Mondays. I had to miss
Sure.
one, a neighborhood meeting. You had to miss because of your schedule. You know, that was,
Sure.
it was nice, but, and I don't know whether we want to do just a swearing in and go home like we did. That's the first time that's ever happened. I mean, in our history, we've always sworn people in and then they just sat down and had their first meeting.
Sure. Yeah. Councilman Duncan.
I mean, obviously, having just gone through this process, I would say I don't know that there was any rush to get on the council immediately after election per se. And,
Okay.
and there's probably, my guess is staff would tell you there's some value in finishing a year with the same councilman, especially if you've discussed, as you did, some very important issues that you spent a year on that suddenly at the end of a year you're through. I would say I think the only awkwardness was, I think it's a good idea because the only awkwardness is telling people who are leaving the council, hey, we'll see you in 3 weeks or 4 weeks for one more meeting, and then you're out of here. That was probably sort of a more awkward situation, so that's why I would, you know, for whatever it's worth,
Go ahead,
suggest.
City Manager.
The other thing I will add is it did affect one council member in that they were intending to leave their capers, and so ended up putting them into another quarter. So by being able to end in December, she did not move into the next quarter and was able to finish her retirement and move forward. So that is another mitigating factor related to, may not be the largest factor for most individuals because they're not on capers, but it is another issue that occurred.
Councilman Lesser.
We'll still have cake at both meetings regardless.
That was my next question, so.
Roger.
Making sure.
Okay. Well, this is a discussion item only, so unless someone else wants to opine on this, we'll move on to the next one. I guess if we have any deep thoughts on that this week, we can send them to the city manager and we'll
Yes.
be considering this next week.
So the second item that we have to discuss on this particular agenda issue is a desire that I have on my part to have a different setup related to the meetings. I'd like to look at that we would have meetings, the first and third meeting of the month be more geared towards action items, and then the second meeting of the month be more geared towards discussion items. In other words, have a little more relaxed setting. It'd still be televised, but we would have it in a different building rather than in this particular setting. Allow more free-flow discussion, I think, between the council and staff related to us sitting around and trying to figure out the problems that we might have, and staff's proposal that may be on a particular issue that would then present the information to them and then begin and have discussions with whomever staff might be involved in that particular issue and myself. And so, but ironically, our city code actually says that all council meetings must be held in this chamber. And so if I want to move a regular city council meeting to a different location, barring something that might be wrong with this location, it's not allowed. So in order to move forward to try and look at that kind of a setup, to be able to meet in a different location, there's a proposal that would state that I would simply designate what location at least 5 days prior. Basically, we would put it in typically in the same location, and I would imagine that those would be the Holiday Building or the LEC, more than likely typically the Holiday Building. So we would still have security and so forth there, and then have our meetings at the same time, mainly focused on discussion items. Now, that doesn't mean that there might not be an action item. You know as well that we typically have consent agenda, which includes our minutes and approval of our permits that might be needed. And then there may be a particular item that has a time-sensitive need to be able to go ahead and move forward as an action item. But it would be a rarity that we would look at doing that, and we would simply try to focus on having discussions about items. I think it could potentially lead to quicker meetings that were focuses on action items where we've already discussed them. That's not a guarantee, but obviously depending on the contentious issue. But really focused on the action items, get through them, and then move on, and then have 2 or 3 discussion items and try and manage the agenda in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. My one question I guess I have is that it's action meeting, the second is discussion meeting, the third is action.
Correct.
So you're going to have 2 action meetings right up against each other, right? Because the third and then the first one again will be action. And what are you going to have to take action on if you've had, if you just came from an action meeting, no discussion meeting, and then
Understood.
another action?
What I would say is that sometimes when we bring items to you for discussion, we actually postpone. We bring them to the second meeting and we wait until that first meeting. And I think depending on the issue that's been held and the amount of discussion, we'll then have that information to know what work we need to do additionally on that particular item in order to bring it fully prepared for your consideration. Maybe we need to have additional meetings with other individuals, and so we'll manage the agenda in that way such that it allows us more time on certain issues, issues that are fully supported when we have the discussion item. We'll bring back the next week. Anything that might be a little more controversial that maybe we need to have one-on-one meetings to discuss or shorter small group meetings will allow us the time to be able to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. Anyone have any questions or any comments? Yes, Councilwoman Hiller, please.
I've got a question on this. Is your vision that we would engage the public in those conversations?
Yes. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The answer is yes. We would still have public comment. I mean, right now, we allow public comment on discussion items, so therefore, there would still be the availability of the public to come and present their thoughts related to a discussion item. So that would not change by the location change.
The only concern I have is that a lot of people don't come very often. This is the city council chambers, and for whatever it's been, 40 years, the council meetings are here. If you're going to come to a council meeting, this is where you come. And I worry about whether, and I'm open to thoughts, I worry about whether people would not know where to go and would show up and we wouldn't be here and would be kind of chasing us around town trying to find the meeting.
Well, My thought would be is that clearly we could put something on the front until this began to be a repetition that was known throughout the community. We could post on our door here that we are at the Holiday Building, and you're less than 5 minutes from that particular location. If someone's coming for a meeting, there's likely not to miss the issue. I mean, we can do that as a, directional setup in the beginning especially.
Just a thought.
Mr. Duncan, or Councilman Duncan?
I mean, I would certainly support something that at least allows this body and the city manager future flexibility to move meetings, because it sounds like part of the problem now is, regardless of what we're going to do or not do, we don't even have the flexibility to have the discussion. I think certainly as technology changes, and I talked to the city folks about this once, gets more mobile, I have a feeling, at least from my perspective, future opportunities then to move this meeting beyond just government buildings. Someday, if we wanted to go out to a different community and show them this is what a city council meeting is. I recall a few years ago, the Kansas Supreme Court started doing some mobile, and people who never in their wild imagination would have shown up to the Supreme Court building suddenly went out to those to just see, sure, I'll go check it out because it's an opportunity. So I would certainly support at least making that change to give us the flexibility to have a discussion of providing those opportunities.
That's a good point.
Anyone else? Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would agree with Councilman Duncan, because I was working at the Supreme Court building and on that Blue Ribbon Council when they came up with that thought and idea of being able to move the government into locations where they had never had the opportunity to see government in action other than on television or so. And the feedback that the Chief Justice got then was amazing. They really enjoyed it. They loved it. And I think the idea of moving it around for some folks to make it maybe even more convenient to them. For some people, maybe that's walking distance rather than driving distance. So I think it's a good idea to give it some thought. I think Lester can probably provide you a whole list of buildings he would like you to see us move the meeting to, but we're probably restricted on that. But I support the idea of looking at it. Thank you.
Mr. Lesser, you want any comment on that?
We can put it in the backyard of the house right off 29th and Topeka Boulevard.
Councilman Dilbert, do you have comments?
Yeah, I think generally I'm in favor of this as well. I would say that, I remember when the council met 4 Tuesdays every month, and it seemed like there was times when that wasn't enough. And then it's gone to 3 Tuesdays, which is nice to have the last Tuesday off. I think managing the agenda, managing the discussion items, really critical to what we do here. So yes. If this does go forward, I imagine I'll be in support of it. But we're going to have to be very careful about how we distribute the load, so we're not backed up at the third meeting of the month till 2 o'clock in the morning. I agree.
Mr. Trout, is there any reason that it would have to be action, discussion, action? I mean, could it just be the second meeting can have action items on it as well, just
Yes.
a different location?
Yes. It's simply to try, I guess, in my mind, it's to focus, and as we as staff, we know issues are coming, and there's no reason that we can't plan ahead to try and group some of the discussion items. And there are times where the action items might need to come on the second meeting in order to move a particular issue forward. So it's not going to be restricted to only discussion items, but that would be the focus of that particular meeting, the second meeting of the month, would be the focus on discussion items.
Yeah, I just thought, listening to Councilman Padilla about seeing government in action, if we only did discussion and took no action, then we'd be seeing government in action, right?
Well, I can
action.
I can fix that.
So, thank you. Yeah, sorry. That was for Mr. Jensen. Councilwoman Hiller.
One other question along the way. Lately, I mean, not that long ago, we used to have work sessions in advance of 6 o'clock, and then we'd go through the business agenda. Then there was a thought that often we had to cut stuff off at 6, even if we weren't done, in order to get that action agenda started, so that it's not been that many years since we had the non-action items in the agenda. And that's gone pretty well, it seems. There are, if I'm correct, on the average, there's often two discussion-only items in each agenda. Would you expect then that we would have 6 different discussion-only items on that meeting number 2? And not have them on the other meetings?
I would be surprised if we would have 6. That would be surprising for me that we would have 6, but until we know specifically what items we're dealing with, I can't answer that. I mean, it is so fluctuating from 3 months from now, there may be an item we're not even aware of that needs to come before us, and so
Understood.
it's just hard to predict. But it is important, and I understand the management of our agenda is important. The longer we stay here, the more difficult it gets, so as we go through our deliberations. So it is something that I'm going to put a lot more emphasis on this year, managing the agenda to have our meetings end at a responsible time.
Well, I think it's great, and I'm open to the change, but I also, when you and I talked about it in our one-on-one about it, often, once you get to the action, people have worked on those issues and they're ready to just vote. But when it's the discussion items, there might be more preparation for each of those than there is for the action items. And so I want people to have time to be prepared for the meaty ones that need a lot of discussion, or it's a briefing and discussion, so.
Any other comments?
My final comment is I appreciate your input. I'm attempting to try and make some changes that I think could make our meeting process go better. If it doesn't, we can go back. But it's worth a try.
Mr. Trout, would it be possible this week, maybe, if you want us to consider this for action next week?
In February, first meeting
In February, thank you. Would it be possible between now and then to get maybe a sample? Can you put something together, maybe what your, that would help me kind of knowing how that would, what the flow of things would be. All right, so seeing no other discussion on that, we move to the next item. If the clerk will please read.
B is discussion for the purpose of reviewing the capital improvements plan policy and the financial parameters of this capital improvements plan for 2021 through 2030.
Well, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, we're entering the new budget preparation timeframe and cycle. Tonight, Deputy Director Hawkins will be presenting an overview of our CIP process in preparation for our first work session related to the budget on February 1st, where we'll discuss the CIP budget. Mr. Hawkins.
All right, Mr. Hawkins, you have the floor.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, I will be giving an overview of the CIP policy. I'm going to discuss the different funding mechanisms for our capital, and I'm going to walk through the structure of the CIP document. And all of this will be in preparation for our February 1st workshop, where we'll go into more detail about the projects and how much the CIP actually is for 2020. So tonight is laying a foundation for that discussion. So first, what is the CIP? Basically, it's our long-range plan for maintenance and development of infrastructure. It identifies present and future capital needs, and it identifies costs and anticipated funding for those capital needs. So the CIP provides a comprehensive plan for capital assets that can be used with other local and regional plans to work towards the overall strategic goals and priorities for the city. It balances the capital needs and with our financial ability to actually pay for those needs. It's also a platform for independent and critical evaluation of projects. And finally, it's a central document for the governing body, the public, and staff to view the capital improvement needs across the city. So this policy was last updated in 2016. One of the major changes of that was it switched from a 5-year view of capital projects to a 10-year view. The first 3 years are what we call the capital improvement budget, And these are projects that have funding identified and plans in place for implementation in their proposed year. So the first year, those are projects that are continuing, they're being initiated and/or being completed during the proposed operating budget year. Years 4 and 5, we have the projects identified, and detailed plans will be developed as they move closer to that CIB. And finally, years 6 through 10, the projects are identified, but at this time, no funding sources are fully developed. Okay, so some of the highlights of the CIP policy. So first, it calls for a consistent property tax levy. So basically, from year to year, we want to make sure that we have financial capacity to pay for all of our debt and operating cost needs. And so if there needs to be a change, we want it to be done slowly over time so we're not overwhelming one particular year. When feasible, projects, our priority should be given to projects that will result in a reduction in operating costs. For our enterprise funds, which are primarily our water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities, they should generate sufficient revenue to finance their own operations and related capital projects, including debt service. And then also, where feasible, a higher priority should be given to maintaining present facilities and infrastructure over new construction. So, in order for looking at the definition of a capital project, it has to meet at least one of the following criteria. It can be real property acquisition, construction of new facilities or addition to existing facilities with a minimum of $50,000, remodeling or repair of existing facilities exceeding $25,000, very simply infrastructure projects, information technology, infrastructure systems that require technology components costing a minimum of $50,000, as well as multi-year phased projects. So capital projects, as you'll see in the book when it's distributed, are generally organized into 7 categories. And these mostly follow along with the council budget priorities that we discuss each year, with the exception of infrastructure is broken out between utilities, streets, and facilities, as well as traffic. So this, the CIP process is a cycle. Each year, the governing body adopts, usually towards the beginning of April. Almost immediately after that, departments are evaluating their capital needs, and oftentimes we're looking multiple years in advance to determine what those needs are. In the fall, we submit a call for projects to departments, and then finance will review those requests with individual departments. They'll be reviewed by the city manager, and right now we're in the process of finalizing the review of those requests and getting it ready to send to you shortly. We'll have our public workshop in February. This is the second year that we will do this towards the beginning of February, which gives the council, the council, an additional 3 or 4 weeks to actually review these projects, and I think helps the discussion later on with the plan. The plan is also reviewed by the Planning Commission. That's usually done at their meeting in February. And then finally, usually in March and April, we're having further discussions on the CIP and adopting in April. So moving to funding sources, there are 6 ways to fund CIP projects. General obligations and short-term notes, utility revenue bonds, dedicated sales tax, cash or pay-as-you-go funding, as well as grants and donations. So general obligation debt, this is one that usually there's a lot of discussion on during the CIP process. So these are bonds secured by the full faith and credit of the city. These are for projects that have an expected life of 5 years or more. We also issue short-term notes that mature within 1 year but can be rolled multiple times. Those are used to fund projects that are in progress, and they can be rolled for, I believe, up to 4 years. We talked about benefit district projects earlier. That's also used for short-term notes because they cannot be bonded until completed and there's a final assessment. So once complete and final cost is known, the notes can be refinanced into long-term bonds. For utility revenue bonds, these are used for water, wastewater, and stormwater projects. The combined utility funds, as we talked about earlier, should generate sufficient revenue to finance their own operations as well as their capital and debt needs. We also have just a few outstanding senior liens for some Kansas State revolving loan funds. Next, we have two dedicated sales tax that are primarily used to fund capital projects. One is the citywide half-cent sales tax that was recently renewed by voters in November of 2018. Those can be used for street, curb, gutter, and sidewalk replacement. We also have the countywide half-cent sales tax, which was renewed for Phase 2 in 2014 and took effect in 2017. That's a combined funding for the county, the Joint Economic Development Organization, as well as the city. And those are for more specific projects. So there are bikeway projects in there. Another example is the Topeka Zoo Master Plan. Those were specific projects that were voted on for Phase 2 of this sales tax. And then other funding is cash on hand or pay-as-you-go. Those are basically needs that are put in the operating budget. The last couple of years, due to the funding needs in the general fund, we haven't been budgeting all of those, and rather we've used that as a priority list. So if there is additional funding during the year, we would use that funding for that capital. And then grants and donations, so these things that we get from outside entities to help fund a specific capital project. You'll see a lot of those with the zoo, with some of our larger public works projects, or even some of our utilities projects. We might get outside funding from federal or state resources as well. So next, we'll be talking about the CIP book. So once the proposed 2021 through 2030 CIP is submitted to the governing body, we will make that available on the city's website. Gave a small tutorial earlier about navigating the website, but if you go to the finance department, you can see, you can go to budget, but you can also go to capital improvement projects, and that will take you to the most recent adopted and proposed CIPs. So the CIP book includes a summary of projects for the next 5 years. These are organized by funding type and project category, as well as individual project sheets detailing cost and funding source for each project. And that is what the bulk of the CIP book is. So looking at one of those individual project sheets, there are several different sections. The first is identifying project information such as name, duration, location, category, and contact information. Next is a brief funding summary, followed by a project description that goes more into depth of what this project or program will actually be accomplishing. We have a project schedule and estimate that goes through the different costs associated with the project. And then we have a section that details the funding sources for this particular project. So highlighted one here, you'll see a lot in the CIP that there are projects with multiple funding sources. Some might be GO bond, citywide sales tax combined. Also talking about donations and grants, a lot of projects will be using the countywide sales tax leveraged with donations. So the individual project sheets detail that out. And then finally, additional information on capital projects as well as other finance pieces for the city can be found at our open portals. So we have our open projects portal, which is updated daily, and you can go in and look at specific capital projects that are in progress. We also have our performance portal and our open budget portal. open data portal, which provide even more information on capital projects and funding for the city. So with that, I will open it up for any questions.
All right, a lot of information there. Is there any question for Mr. Hawkins at this time? Yes, Councilmember Doborg.
Just a quick question. Are we still buying fire apparatus using the CIP?
Yes, so those are, we have a number of different funding sources for that, but primarily right now and going forward, we have that in the CIP under our general obligation bond.
So where does it fall under CIP project definitions? Just having a tough time fitting it into one of those 6 categories.
So I think primarily that's under our, are you looking at which categories are you looking at?
It's like page 6, I think.
Page 6, okay. Yeah, so I would say that, it's something that, and we'll also be talking about some other vehicle requests as well. I would say that's could be considered a multi-year project because we're doing multiple fire trucks at a time. I think you could also generally make a case that that's also an infrastructure project. I believe we've been doing that for the last several years for the fire apparatus, but that's definitely something we can follow up on and get some more information to you.
Seems like something that should be a little bit better defined in that ordinance. Thank you.
Anyone else? You'll be, just preview the things to come, you'll be seeing Mr. Hawkins a lot more over the next couple months as we do the CIP and the budget, so thank you. Now, often at 8 o'clock we take a break, however, we're at the end of our agenda, and I think we just have, you want to take a break? Or, okay, I was, so yeah, so if there's no protest, I think we will, we're now ready to proceed with public comment, but I do not believe we have anyone signed up. Is that? All right, well, no public comments, so now we come to no preliminary agenda for next week. So, Mr. City Manager, any announcements?
Thank you. I'll cover just 3 things. The first thing related to our first meeting in February, we will have a presentation by Tim Laurent, the Shawnee County Shawnee County Parks and Recreation Director. He will be coming to talk about and give an overview about the system and the work that they're doing. And it was something that had been mentioned to me a while back as something that we should be looking at getting a presentation. And it's something that I look at as being an annual thing, but looking forward to hearing his comments and his presentation on the 4th of February. Want to announce tonight that I think it's been announced already, the East Topeka North was selected as this year's SORT neighborhood. And they're going to have a meeting Thursday, February 6th from 6 to 7:30 for their neighborhood plan kickoff meeting. That's going to be held at the Salvation Army at 1320 Southeast 6th. So excited for them as they begin the process for SORT. They'll eventually work through their plan, get it updated, and provide an update to us in the fall as to what projects they're intending to do. Last item I have is that just wanted to make sure and remind everyone that I mentioned it before, but our Advanced Life Support Program, pilot program, has begun. Engine 7 and Engine 8 have our paramedics on them as part of their crew. They're able to provide advanced life support based on the equipment and training that they have. So that's a beginning process where I'm actually collecting a lot of metrics related to that whole process and how the pilot program runs, which will impact as we go forward in the future.
All right, thank you, City Manager. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, you are next.
Okay. Wanted to just tell folks, be careful out there. I think we're supposed to get some snow, and so check on each other. Have your cars ready, don't be driving too fast, things like that. Also for District 2 residents, want you all to know that I have been working with the NIAs, and they are a wonderful group. Just to let you know that they are looking for new membership, encouraging new membership. Also, we are starting to work to develop a plan to relaunch neighborhood watch programs as well, and looking for anyone interested in community gardens throughout the district. If anyone is interested in any of these things, please feel free to give me a call at 233-7110. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First, I want to say congratulations to you.
Thank you.
You started off really well. 2 chairs between us is great.
Thank you.
Second, I just want to publicly thank the street crews. I just don't think they get enough recognition. And the last ice that we had, they were out there. Those guys are out there. And to the new people, if you have not ever rode in one of those trucks, put your gear on and go see what they challenge out there. The people that are trying to get to nowhere, it's a eye opener. So I would put that challenge to you. Next, I would just like to thank my grandson, who will be 13 on Saturday. I will have a teenager. He's grandson number 1. And I just Granny wanted to say happy birthday to you, Joelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. I just have a couple things. I will second what my colleagues have already said about the streets. They're going to be slick tonight. I do really appreciate that now our Public Works is kind of being proactive, and they're saying this is our plan for tonight. But I will tell you, with the temperatures tonight, it's going to be tough because, you know, if it's a couple degrees warmer, it's going to be no problem, and if it's a couple degrees colder, it's going to be a mess, no matter if we had 1,000 trucks out there fixing them. So please, if you don't have to go somewhere in the morning, it's slick, just stay home. I'm betting some schools are canceled. I don't know that yet, but I'm betting they will be. Yeah. I also wanted to pass. We've had a couple incidents this week that I really appreciate the police chief kind of letting us know. We had the incident yesterday at Sam's Club where people were really worried because there were cars out front and there was a lot of police and stuff there. So I appreciate he got out the word to us quick on that. And today we had the bomb threat incident downtown. So I don't know if everyone knows about that or not, but okay. I think it was reported in the news. Hopefully it was. Okay. Last, talking about projects, you all got an email. We were copied on an email today about a new sidewalk. So I think for as long as I've ever lived in Highland Park, which started in like 1969, there's never been a sidewalk on the south side of of 29th, from Adams past the golf course, what used to be Shawnee County Country Club, or Shawnee Country Club. And now, for the first time starting last week, people can walk from Mr. Padilla's district on a sidewalk without going out into 29th Street. And it's a magnificent project. I want to thank Mark Schreiner from engineering. He oversaw that project. It was very tough because there's just a lot of grade problems, a lot of space problems there. I want to thank the owners of Great Life Fitness. They donated the right-of-way through there. Westar moved some poles at no cost. It was a great project. Brian Austin did the engineering, and Sunflower Paving did the work. But it's something we've needed for 40, 50 years. And I really appreciate everyone coming together to do that. It's something I advocated from my first day on the job 3.5 years ago. So it's nice to see that done. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Padilla. Okay. Ms. Nager. Okay. Councilman Dobler.
Yeah, just a couple of real quick things. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I know you'll do a fine job. And I'll echo, beyond the street crews that are out there, this is the worst time of the year for water main breaks, when it's cold like this, below freezing. It's easy to sit around and take pot shots at city employees. You try getting out in the hole when it's 12 degrees and fix a water line. So kudos to those folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan.
Just one thing, when I ran for this seat, I promised that I would hold quarterly meetings in my district, and so I just put the word out. I'm working on that, and I should have one in March, and so stay tuned and check my social media, and I'll put it out there for all those who want to come. So I just want to let people know it will happen. I promised it. It'll get done.
Thank you. Mr. Lesser.
The only thing I have real quick is I too wanted to thank Chief for the updates. I don't know what, he's always been very good at communicating and information to us and what have you, but apparently he had another New Year's resolution and read a book or something because the communication's gone really crazy. But it honestly, as you said, it does help because, you know, people in my office came in, I said, yeah, I know, Chief's already on it and stuff like that. And that sounds kind of silly, but it, you know, makes them feel a little bit more secure. So thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Welcome again, new council members. It's great. Y'all seem totally grooved in. You got your training. Awesome. Thanks for agreeing to serve as Deputy Mayor, and congrats to the JADO and MPO appointees. On behalf sort of the Deputy Mayor, if anybody hasn't turned in their committee requests, I think today was the deadline, but I know it'll be appreciated to have them in because I think planning to get on those committee assignments right away. And the one other thing, which is kind of random to report, is that over the Christmas holiday, because of the riverfront meeting that we'd had in my district, I accepted an invitation and went on a tour of Topeka Foundry. And all of us have businesses of one sort or another in our business. It was in our districts, and it was just fun. That business was founded in 1876 and is working on 150 years in Topeka. For those who have followed it today, when it was bought, it was Topeka Foundry and Iron Works, as well as the Topeka Door Company, and was bought by a company called HME 3 years ago, and they're up in North Topeka. That company is growing and thriving. It was founded only in 1996. There are over 80 great jobs in Topeka, and they are growing solidly. The parent company now has over 300 employees. And it was not only fun to see them and get around to all the different installations that they have, but it reminded me that whether they get any funding or incentives or are on our radar at all, for the most part, companies are here just working away, doing great product, being local or national or even global, hiring people and growing every day. And encourage people to get out when you get a chance. It was great to visit Topeka Foundry. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Just one more thing to add. We had a great meeting all day Saturday. It was about 8 hours of meeting Saturday. You know, I really respected the people we had on the council last year, but I'll tell you, the new members this year really impressed me. So it's going to be a fantastic 4 years with you guys. So I really look forward to it. And I also really appreciate tonight. I know we talked about a difficult subject, especially when we talk about the nonprofit grants, because I think all of us have organizations that we know do great things in the community. I just really appreciate how civil the discourse was tonight, and I really appreciate that. I think it bodes well for our future. So we've come to the end of the agenda. There is no need for an executive session, so seeing nothing else, we're hereby adjourned. Good night.